What is mental imagery? Mental imagery is a term used to refer to the experience of seeing pictures in our minds. So here's a question. Which is taller, a rabbit or a rat? How did you decide? Most people complete that task by forming mental images in their mind of the two animals and then comparing their heights. Consider each pair of figures. Are they the same or are they different? How did you decide? Mental imagery was something that was studied way back in Wilhelm Wundt's laboratory in 1879. Because it is not something that is observable, it was not studied by the behaviorists from about 1910 to 1960. After the cognitive revolution, many people were definitely interested in mental imagery, but the question was, how do you study it? In a classic experiment by Shepard and Metzler, they asked participants to judge whether two visual shapes were the same or different. And the way that judgment is made is that it relies on mental imagery. One strategy for doing the task is to consider one of the images a standard, and the second image what you're going to compare to that standard. So you rotate mentally, using your mind's eye, the second image to see if it will line up with the standard. If it does, they're the same shape. If they don't line up, then you can judge that they are different shapes. Shepard and Metzler in 1971 had participants do this task while they recorded how quickly they could make their response. And they found that the amount of time that it took participants for a given trial was correlated positively with how far they had to rotate the second object in their mind's eye. So people were slower when they had to rotate the second object farther in their mind's eye. These studies showed for the first time that there is a psychological reality to mental images and that they can be measured. In later research by Stephen Coslin and others, there were similar results when people are asked to memorize a map that contained multiple landmarks, such as a well, or a building, or a lake, or a tree. After people remembered these maps, then they were asked to mentally travel between the different locations in their mind's eye. The time it took them to travel these distances was directly correlated to how far the objects were apart on the map. There are individual differences in how we experience mental imagery. Some people have no mental imagery or very sparse mental imagery. This condition is called aphantasia. There's a link on Canvas to tell you a little bit more about this condition. Some people actually experience more mental imagery than others. For example, Temple Grandin, in her famous book Thinking in Pictures, describes how she, as a person with autism spectrum disorder, relies on mental imagery primarily over verbal information. There's a link on Canvas that has an interview with Temple Grandin. I highly recommend it. Research in the 70s has actually pointed out the fact that some of our knowledge of words in fact involves mental imagery. Some words refer to concepts that are easy to imagine. These are called concrete words, such as chair or table or pillow. Other words refer to concepts that are not so easy to imagine, such as fancy, patriotism, freedom. These are called abstract words. A researcher named Pavio in the early 1970s claimed that the processing of these two kinds of words would be different, concrete words versus abstract words. He claimed that concrete words actually have two kinds of mental representations, one that's verbal and the other that is visual. Contrast, abstract words, he believed, had only one kind of mental representation, and that would be verbal. He found evidence for his theory in studies that showed that concrete words were recognized faster and remembered better than abstract words. So, for example, words like chair, tree, necklace could be recognized in a lexical decision task faster than words like patriotism, honesty, willingness. And also, if you had a memory task in which you gave people a long list of words to remember and then later tested them on remembering those words, the concrete words would be remembered more often. The explanation was that there is a processing advantage for concrete words because they have two memory representations that can aid us in memory retrieval. In contrast, abstract words have just one kind of memory representation. That's all for now.